Hello, my dear Butcho, and welcome back. I know, the board exams are right around the corner and the tension is building up, isn't it? But don't you worry, we're going to make revision fun. Today, we're tackling one of my favorite chapters, Kinship, Caste, and Class. Think of it as a crash course that's going to make everything crystal clear. So, you ready? Let's go.
Of course, we've all grown up with the stories of the Mahabharata, haven't we? The huge battles, the family drama. It's epic. But what if I told you it's not just a story? For historians, it's actually like a secret window, a way to peek into the society of ancient India and see how people lived thousands of years ago. So let's open that window and take a look inside.
You see, for a historian, the Mahabharata is a total treasure chest. I mean, this book has over 1 lakh verses. Can you even imagine? And it wasn't written by one person overnight. Nope. It was put together over a period of 1,000 years. That's what makes it so amazing for understanding the social rules, the family setups, and all the fights and dramas of that time.
Now, at the very heart of this whole epic is the biggest family fight of all time, the one between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. But what was it all about? Well, what it's always about: land, power, and who gets to sit on the throne of Hastinapura. This massive family feud is the perfect way for us to understand our first big idea: kinship.
Just try to put yourself in Duryodhana's shoes for a second. He was terrified, you know? If Yudhishthira became king, it wasn't just about him losing the crown. It was about his sons and his sons' sons having nothing. This wasn't just a personal fight, it was for the entire family line. And this deep-seated fear brings us to a super important concept.
And that word is Patriliny. Okay, Bachcho, get your highlighters out. You have to remember this for your exams. Patriliny is a system where everything, the name, the property, the throne, it all passes from the father to the son to the grandson. The Mahabharata basically screams that this is the best, the most ideal way for royal families to work.
Okay, so we've got the sons sorted. They get the kingdom, they get the property, they continue the family line. But what about the daughters? What was their deal? Since they couldn't inherit the throne, what was their role? You might think it was simple, but oh no. The rules for them were anything but simple.
So, the rule books, like the Dharma Sutras, had some very specific ideas about the perfect marriage. First, there was exogamy. Sounds complicated, but exo just means outside, so you had to marry your daughter to someone outside your own family group. Second, a woman had to give up her father's Gotra and take her husband's. And third, kanyadadam, the gift of a daughter, was seen as a father's most sacred duty. These were the official rules anyway.
But here's the juicy part. Did everyone actually follow these rules? No way. And the biggest rule breaker is right there in the Mahabharata, our very own Draupadi. She was married to all 5 Pandava brothers, 1 wife, 5 husbands. This is called polyandry. And let me tell you, that was not in the rule book. This shows us that what the book said and what people actually did were 2 very different things.
Okay, so we've seen the family rules. Now let's zoom out a bit. What about the rules for everyone in society? That's where we get to the idea of the 4 Varnas. The easiest way to picture it is, well, like a giant social pyramid. Everyone had a fixed place and a fixed job, right from the moment they were born.
So you might be wondering, how do they make everyone just accept this system? I mean, who would want to be at the bottom, right? Well, they had a pretty clever explanation. They pointed to a verse in the Rig Veda, which said this whole order came from the gods themselves, from a divine being named Purusha. His mouth became the Brahmanas, his arms the Kshatriyas, and so on. And if it's divine, you can't really argue with it, can you?
And here's the ladder itself. All right, take a mental screenshot of this. It's super important for the exam. At the very top, you have the Brahmanas, the priests and teachers. Right below them, the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors and rulers. Then came the Vaishyas, the traders, farmers, the business people. And at the very bottom were the Shudras, whose only job was to serve the other 3.
But this system, this wasn't just an idea in a book. It had real, and sometimes very harsh, consequences for people's lives. And no story shows this more clearly than the heartbreaking tale of Ekalavya, a young boy from a forest-dwelling community.
You see, Ekalavya was a brilliant archer. He made a clay statue of the great teacher Drona and practiced in front of it until he became even better than Arjuna. But when Drona found out, he couldn't have that. A boy from the forest being better than his royal student? No way. So he asked for the most terrible guru dakshina you can imagine, Ekalavya's right thumb. And just like that, his archery career was over. It's a sad story, but it shows how brutally these rules were sometimes enforced.
So you see how strict the rules could be. But this brings us back to our big theme for today: rules versus reality. The rule book said your place in life was fixed. But did everyone just quietly accept that? Did they all play by the rules?
Let's take the most powerful job of all, being a king. The rule books, the Shastras, they say it loud and clear. Only Kshatriyas can be kings. Sounds simple, right? But what do you think? Is that what really happened in history?
Not even close. History is full of kings who broke this rule. The mighty Mauryan emperors, people said they were of low origin. The Shungas and Kanvas who came after them, they were Brahmanas. And the Shaka rulers, they were considered mletshas, or outsiders. So what does this all tell us? It tells us that having actual power, well, that was often more important than any rule book.
Okay, last big topic for today, everyone. Let's talk about wealth and property. In this whole system, who actually got to own stuff? And importantly, were the rules for owning things the same for men and for women? Let's find out.
For this, we have to go back to that crazy, infamous game of dice in the Mahabharata, remember? Yudhishthira just keeps losing. First his wealth, then his kingdom. And then he gambles away his own brothers and even their wife, Draupadi. I mean, can you believe that? This one scene just raises so many questions about who owned what and who could be treated like property.
And if we look at a rulebook like the Manusmriti, the difference is just crystal clear. For men, it lists 7 different ways to get wealth: inheritance, working, even winning a war. But for women, the list is much smaller, and it's mostly about gifts they could receive, especially at their wedding. You can see the huge economic gap right there.
Okay, another highlighter moment. The wealth that a woman could own had a special name: Stridhana. Stri means woman, Dana means wealth. Easy. And this was her wealth. Her husband had no claim on it, and she could pass it to her children. So it gave them some control, but it was still very limited compared to what men owned.
Now, as we're wrapping up, you might be thinking, sir, this whole thing is a bit confusing. One part of the Mahabharata talks about polyandry, another part talks about Kanyadana. What's going on? And that's a brilliant question.
Well, the answer is that the Mahabharata isn't like a single book written by one author. It's more like a giant snowball that rolled for over 1,000 years, picking up new stories and ideas along the way. It started with storytellers called suttas. Then Brahmanas started writing it down and added their own rules. Later, more sections were added. So of course it has contradictions. It's a living text with many different layers.
And you know what? The story is still growing today. The amazing writer Mahashweta Devi points out something most of us probably miss. Remember the story of the burning house of Lak? The Pandavas escaped, but how? A Nishada woman and her 5 sons died in their place. The epic just moves on, but Mahashweta Devi forces us to stop and think about them, and suddenly the story looks very, very different.
And that, my dear students, is the most important question of all. History isn't just about facts, it's about who gets to tell the story and whose story gets forgotten. So as you study this chapter, always ask yourself, whose voice am I hearing and whose voice is silent? That's all for our quick revision today. Study well, stay calm, and you are going to do wonderfully in your exams. All the very best.